welcome to this. We're going to be reading this. First, we're going to be reading the Bible, and then we're going to be doing substance, and then we're going to be reading Little Women. Women. Okay. I hope you guys enjoy. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell numbers of the video. There's a Bible basher right here. I will not stop until he bashes me. Okay, I'm going now.
Give him the all-important slap bracelet, JoJo.
Hello. I've been attacked. Hello, everybody. All right, this is Matthew chapter 16. Let me go ahead and get started. This is from the English Standard Version, as I always read from when I am able to. And the Pharisees and Sadducees came, and to test him, they asked him to show them a sign from heaven. He answered them, "When it is evening, you say it will be fair weather, for the sky is red. And in the morning, it will be stormy today, for the sky is red and threatening. You know how to interpret the appearance of the sky, but you cannot interpret the signs of the times. An evil and adulterous generation seeks for a sign, but no sign will be given to it, except the sign of Jonah." So he left them and departed. When the disciples reached the other side, they had forgotten to bring any bread. Jesus said to them, "Watch and beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." And they began discussing it among themselves, saying, "We brought no bread." But Jesus, aware of this, said, "O you of little faith, why are you discussing among yourselves the fact that you have no bread? Do you not yet perceive? Do you not remember the 5 loaves for the 5,000, and how many baskets you gathered? Or the 7 loaves for the 4,000, and how many baskets you gathered? How is it that you fail to understand that I did not speak about bread? Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and Sadducees." Then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but of the teaching of the Pharisees and Sadducees. Now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that the Son of Man is?" And they said, "Some say John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others Jeremiah or one of the prophets." He said to them, "But who do you say that I am?" Simon Peter replied, "You are the Christ, the Son of the living God." And Jesus answered him, "Blessed are you, Simon Bar-Jonah, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father who is in heaven. And I tell you, you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. I will give you the keys of the kingdom of heaven, and whatever you bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatever you loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven." Then he strictly charged his disciples to tell no one that he was the Christ. From that time, Jesus began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things from the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the 3rd day be raised. And Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him, saying, "Far be it from you, Lord, this shall never happen to you." But he turned and said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." Then Jesus told his disciples, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and forfeits his soul? Or what shall a man give in return for his soul? For the Son of Man is going to come with his angels in the glory of his Father, and then he will repay each person according to what he has done. Truly I say to you, there are some standing here who will not taste death until they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom." That's the end of Matthew chapter 16, so we will pick up from there next time. So, we are reading Little Women. Last time we started part 2, and they're talking about Meg's funeral. And so everyone is crying, and so here's Kimberly to say how it really happened.
a sec. Oh, here you go again. Ow. So what actually happened is, sorry, I think I have a nosebleed or something. Everyone is preparing for Meg's wedding, not her funeral. And mainly it's just a bunch of gossip and stuff like that. And like a recap because it's been 3 whole years. But other than that, not much has happened. I'm going to hand it off to Dad, who's going to read us a story. And he needs to be slapped again.
Hello.
Long
It's a slap bracelet.
Ow!
It didn't even
All right,
go
I got
on.
slapped and it ran away. All right, so ran away. That's right.
One second.
All right, so we're on chapter 2, the first wedding. So, yeah, because there's 4 girls. Hey, let's not do that, okay? All right, so we need to settle down here a little bit, and then we'll get started. All right, so we're on chapter 2, the first wedding. And I wanted to point out also, and I forgot to last time, that this is, in case you forgot, this is a serial novel, just like Jules Verne wrote serial novels. And so basically every chapter was published weekly. And so the first set was, I don't know if it was published in 24 weeks or if it was like every other week, and it was published over the course of a year. But so this is also the second, it's like a TV series, and this is the second season, something like that. We're still trying to settle here. I'm not sure what's going on.
I can't find my Bible.
Yeah, because I put it away for you.
Where?
In your room.
Oh.
So that you could find it. She's complaining because she can't find her Bible after the live stream. All right, so now we're on chapter 2, the wedding, the first wedding. The June roses over the porch were awake bright and early on that morning, rejoicing with all their hearts in the cloudless sunshine, like friendly little neighbors as they were. Quite flushed with excitement were their ruddy faces, as they swung in the wind, whispering to one another what they had seen. For some peeped in at the dining room windows where the feast was spread. Some climbed up to nod and smile at the sisters as they dressed the bride. Others waved a welcome to those who came and went on various errands in the garden, porch and hall and all, from the rosiest full-blown flower to the palest baby bud, offered their tribute of beauty and fragrance to the gentle mistress who had loved and tended them so long. Meg looked very like a rose herself, for all that was best and sweetest in heart and soul seemed to bloom into her face that day, making it fair and tender with a charm more beautiful than beauty. Neither silk, lace, nor orange flowers would she have. "I don't want to look strange or fixed up today," she said. "I don't want a fashionable wedding, but only those about me whom I love, and to them I wish to look and be my familiar self." So she made her wedding gown herself, sewing into it the tender hopes and innocent romances of a girlish heart. Her sisters braided up her pretty hair, and the only ornaments she wore were the lilies of the valley, which her John liked best of all the flowers that grew. "You do look just like our own dear Meg, only so very sweet and lovely that I should hug you if it wouldn't crumple your dress," cried Amy, surveying her with delight when all was done. "Then I am satisfied, but please hug and kiss me, every one, and don't mind my dress. I want a great many crumples of this sort put into it today." And Meg opened her arms to her sisters, who clung about her with April faces, for a minute feeling that the new love had not changed the old. "Now I'm going to tie John's cravat for him," that's a tie, by the way, "and then to stay a few minutes with Father, quietly in the study." And Meg ran down to perform these little ceremonies, and then to follow her mother wherever she went, conscious that in spite of the smiles on the motherly face, there was a secret sorrow hidden in the motherly heart at the flight of the first bird from the nest. As the younger girls stand together, giving the last touches to their simple toilet, it may be a good time to tell of a few changes which 3 years have wrought in their appearance, for all are looking their best just now. Jo's angles are much softened. She has learned to carry herself with ease, if not grace. The curly crop has been lengthened into a thick coil, more becoming to the small head atop of the tall figure. There is a fresh color in her brown cheeks, a soft shine in her eyes. Only gentle words fall from her sharp tongue today. Beth has grown slender, pale, and more quiet than ever. The beautiful, kind eyes are larger, and in them lies an expression that saddens one, although it is not sad itself. It is the shadow of pain which touches the young face with such pathetic patience. But Beth seldom complains, and always speaks hopefully of being better soon. Amy is, with truth considered, the flower of the family, for at 16 she has the air and bearing of a full-grown woman, not beautiful, but possessed of that indescribable charm called grace. One saw it in the lines of her figure, the make and motion of her hands, the flow of her dress, the droop of her hair, unconscious yet harmonious and as attractive to many as beauty itself. Amy's nose still afflicted her, for it never would grow Grecian, so did her mouth, being too wide and having a decided underlip. These offending features gave character to her whole face, but she never could see it, and consoled herself with her wonderfully fair complexion, keen blue eyes, and curls more golden and abundant than ever. All three wore suits of thin silvery gray, their best gowns for the summer, with blush roses in hair and bosom, and all three looked just what they were, fresh-faced, happy-hearted girls, pausing a moment in their busy lives to read with wistful eyes the sweetest chapter in the romance of womanhood. There were to be no ceremonious performances. Everything was to be as natural and homelike as possible. So when Aunt March arrived, she was scandalized to see the bride come running to welcome and lead her in, to find the bridegroom fastening up a garland that had fallen down, and to catch a glimpse of the paternal minister marching upstairs with a grave countenance and a wine bottle under each arm. "Upon my word, here's a state of things," cried the old lady, taking the seat of honor prepared for her, and settling the folds of her lavender moire with a great rustle. "You oughtn't to be seen till the last minute, child. I'm not a show, Auntie, and no one is coming to stare at me, to criticize my dress, to count the cost of my luncheon. I'm too happy to care what anyone says or thinks, and I'm going to have my little wedding just as I like it. John, dear, here's your hammer," and away went Meg to help that man in his highly improper employment. Mr. Brooke didn't even say thank you, but as he stooped for the unromantic tool, he kissed his little bride behind the folding door with a look that made Aunt March whisk out her pocket handkerchief with a sudden dew in her sharp old eyes. A crash, a cry, and a laugh from Laurie, accompanied by the indecorous exclamation, "Jupiter Ammon!" Jo's "upset the cake again" caused the momentary flutter, which was hardly over when a flock of cousins arrived, and the party came in, as Beth used to say when a child. "Don't let that young giant come near me. He worries me worse than mosquitoes," whispered the old lady to Amy as the rooms filled, and Laurie's black head towered above the rest. "He has promised to be very good today, and he can be perfectly elegant if he likes," returned Amy, gliding away to warn Hercules to beware of the dragon, which warning caused him to haunt the old lady with a devotion that nearly distracted her. There was no bridal procession, but a sudden silence fell upon the room as Mr. March and the young pair took their places under the green arch. Mother and sisters gathered close as if loath to give Meg up. The fatherly voice broke more than once, which only seemed to make the service more beautiful and solemn. The bridegroom's hand trembled visibly, and no one heard his replies. But Meg looked straight up in her husband's eyes and said, "I will," with such tender trust in her own face and voice that her mother's heart rejoiced and Aunt March sniffed audibly. Jo did not cry, though she was very near it once, and was only saved from a demonstration by the consciousness that Laurie was staring fixedly at her, with a comical mixture of merriment and emotion in his wicked black eyes. Beth kept her face hidden on her mother's shoulder, but Amy stood like a graceful statue with the most becoming ray of sunshine touching her white forehead and the flower in her hair. It wasn't at all the thing, I'm afraid, but the minute she was fairly married, Meg cried, "The first kiss for Marmee," and turning, gave it with her heart on her lips. During the next 15 minutes she looked more like a rose than ever, for everyone availed themselves of the privileges to the fullest extent, from Mr. Lawrence to old Hannah, who adorned with a headdress fearfully and wonderfully made, fell upon her in the hall, crying with a sob and a chuckle, "Bless you, dearie, 100 times. The cake ain't hurt a mite, and everything looks lovely." Everybody cleared up after that and said something brilliant, or tried to, which did just as well, for laughter is ready when hearts are light. There was no display of gifts, for they were already in the little house, nor was there an elaborate breakfast, but a plentiful lunch of cake and fruit dressed with flowers. Mr. Lawrence and Aunt March shrugged and smiled at one another when water, lemonade, and coffee were found to be the only sorts of nectar which the three Hebs carried round. Heb, the Greek goddess of youth and a daughter of Zeus and Hera, served nectar and ambrosia to the gods. No one said anything, however, till Laurie, who insisted on serving the bride, appeared before her with a loaded salver in his hand and puzzled expression on his face. "Has Jo smashed all the bottles by accident," he whispered, "or am I merely laboring under a delusion that I saw some lying about loose this morning? No, your grandfather kindly offered us his best, and Aunt March actually sent some, but Father put away a little for Beth and dispatched the rest for the soldiers' home. You know he thinks that wine should only be used in illness, and Mother says that neither she nor her daughters will ever offer it to any young man under her roof." Meg spoke seriously, and expected to see Laurie frown or laugh, but he did neither, for after a quick look at her, he said in his impetuous way, "I like that, for I've seen enough harm done to wish other women would think as you do. You are not made wise by experience, I hope," and there was an anxious accent in Meg's voice. "No, I give you my word for it. Don't think too well of me, either. This is not one of my temptations. Being brought up where wine is as common as water, and almost as harmless, I don't care for it, but when a pretty girl offers it, one don't like to refuse, you see. But you will for the sake of others, if not for your own. Come, Laurie, promise, and give me one more reason to call this the happiest day of my life." A demand so sudden and so serious made the young man hesitate a moment, for ridicule is often harder to bear than self-denial. Meg knew that if he gave the promise, he would keep it at all costs, and feeling her power, used it as a woman may for her friend's good. She did not speak, but she looked up at him with a face made very eloquent by happiness, and a smile which said, "No one can refuse me anything today." Laurie certainly could not, and with an answering smile he gave her his hand, saying heartily, "I promise, Mrs. Brooke." "I thank you very, very much, and I drink long life to your resolution, Teddy," cried Jo, baptizing him with a splash of lemonade, as she waved her glass and beamed approvingly upon him. So the toast was drunk and the pledge made, and loyally kept in spite of many temptations, for with instinctive wisdom the girls had seized a happy moment to do their friend a service for which he thanked them all his life. After lunch, people strolled about by twos and threes through house and garden, enjoying the sunshine without and within. Meg and John happened to be standing together in the middle of the grass plot when Laurie was seized with an inspiration which put the finishing touch to this unfashionable wedding. All the married people take hands and dance round the new-made husband and wife, as the Germans do, while we bachelors and spinsters prance in couples outside," cried Laurie, galloping down the path with Amy, with such infectious spirit and skill that every one else followed their example without a murmur. Mr. and Mrs. March, Aunt and Uncle Carroll began it. Others rapidly joined in. Even Sally Moffat, after a moment's hesitation, threw her train over her arm and whisked Ned into the room. But the crowning joke was Mr. Lawrence and Aunt March, for when the stately old gentleman chassed solemnly up to the old lady, she just tucked her cane under her arm and hopped briskly away to join hands with the rest and dance about the bridal pair, while the young folks pervaded the garden like butterflies on a midsummer day. Want of breath brought the impromptu ball to a close, and then people began to go. "I wish you well, my dear. I heartily wish you well, but I think you'll be sorry for it," said Aunt March to Meg, adding to the bridegroom as he led her to the carriage, "You've got a treasure, young man. See that you deserve it." "That is the prettiest wedding I've been to for an age, Ned, and I don't see why, for there wasn't a bit of style about it," observed Mrs. Moffat to her husband as they drove away. "Laurie, my lad, if you ever want to indulge in this sort of thing, get one of those little girls to help you, and I shall be perfectly satisfied," said Mr. Lawrence, settling himself in his easy chair to rest after the excitement of the morning. "I'll do my best to gratify you, sir," was Laurie's unusually dutiful reply, as he carefully unpinned the posy Joe had put in his buttonhole. The little house was not far away, and the only bridal journey Meg had was the quiet walk with John from the old home to the new, when she came down looking like a pretty Quakeress in her dove-colored suit and straw bonnet tied with the white. They all gathered about her to say good-bye, as tenderly as if she had been going to make the grand tour. "Don't feel that I am separated from you, Marmee dear, or that I love you any the less for loving John so much," she said, clinging to her mother with full eyes for a moment. "I shall come every day, father, and expect to keep my old place in all your hearts, though I am married. Beth is going to be with me a great deal, and the other girls will drop in now and then to laugh at my housekeeping struggles. Thank you all for my happy wedding day. Goodbye, goodbye." They stood watching her with faces full of love and hope and tender pride as she walked away, leaning on her husband's arm with her hands full of flowers and the June sunshine brightening her happy face. And so Meg's married life began. And that's the end of chapter 2. Let's go back with the pictures. This is Meg's wedding as imagined by Alice Barber Stevens. And let's go back one more page. This is the Crusade Against Alcohol was one of the leading reform movements of 19th century America. We all know how that turned out. And here is a certificate of marriage, John Pratt and Anna Alcott's marriage license. And then on the other side, there's Louisa's uncle, the Reverend Samuel May. So you'll see both of those here. There's the marriage license. There's the uncle. And this one is the Orchard House. Anna Alcott married on May 23rd, 1860. So this was... that's actually before the Civil War, if it's 1860. Because the Civil War started after Abraham Lincoln was in office. And here is lovingly preserved and gently handled at the Orchard House for more than 150 years. Here's Anna Alcott Pratt's wedding dress.
Oh my gosh. Holy moly.
Wow. Oh, it's so pretty. Wow. Wish I had a wedding dress that pretty.
Well, you'll get a wedding dress when you get married.
Yeah, I can.
That is a prerequisite. All right, so All right, so this is Chapter 3, Artistic Attempts. It takes people a long time to learn the difference between talent and genius, especially ambitious young men and women. Amy was learning this distinction through much tribulation. For mistaking enthusiasm for inspiration, she attempted every branch of art with youthful audacity. For a long time there was a lull in the mud pie business, and she devoted herself to the finest pen and ink drawing, in which she showed such taste and skill that her graceful handiwork proved both pleasant and profitable. But overstrained eyes soon caused pen and ink to be laid aside for a bold attempt at poker sketching. While this attack lasted, the family lived in constant fear of a conflagration, for the odor of burning wood pervaded the house at all hours. Smoke issued from attic and shed with alarming frequency. Red-hot pokers lay about promiscuously, and Hannah never went to bed without a pail of water and the dinner bell at her door in case of fire. Raphael's face was found boldly executed on the underside of the molding board, and Bacchus on the head of the beer barrel. A chanting cherub adorned the cover of the sugar bucket, and attempts to portray Garrick buying gloves in the grisette supplied kindlings for some time. Sorry. From fire to oil was a natural transition for burnt fingers, and Amy fell to painting with undiminished ardor. An artist friend fitted her out with his cast of palettes, brushes, and colors, and she daubed away, producing pastoral and marine views such as were never seen on land or sea. Her monstrosities in the way of cattle would have taken prizes at an agricultural fair, and the perilous pitching of her vessels would have produced seasickness in the most nautical observer, if the utter disregard to all known rules of shipbuilding and rigging had not convulsed him with laughter at the first glance. Swarthy boys and dark-eyed Madonnas staring at you from one corner of the studio did not suggest Murillo. Oily brown shadows of faces with a lurid streak in the wrong place meant Rembrandt. Buxom ladies and dropsical infants, Rubens and Turner, appeared in tempests of blue thunder, orange lightning, and brown rain, and purple clouds with a tomato-colored splash in the middle, which might be the sun or a buoy or a sailor's shirt or a king's robe, as the spectator pleased. Charcoal portraits came next, and the entire family hung in a row, looking as wild and crocky as if just evoked from a local coal bin. Softened into crayon sketches, they did better, for the likenesses were good, and Amy's hair, Joe's nose, Meg's mouth, and Laurie's eyes were pronounced wonderfully fine. A return to clay and plaster followed, and ghostly casts of her acquaintances haunted corners of the house, or tumbled off closet shelves onto people's heads. Children were enticed in as models, till their incoherent accounts of her mysterious doings caused Miss Amy to be regarded in the light of young ogress. In the light of a young ogress. Her efforts in this line, however, were brought to an abrupt close by an untoward accident which quenched her ardor. Other models failing her for a time, she undertook to cast her own pretty foot, and the family were one day alarmed by an unearthly bumping and screaming, and, running to the rescue, found the young enthusiast hopping wildly about the shed, with her foot held fast in a painful of plaster which had hardened with unexpected rapidity. With much difficulty and some danger she was dug out, for Joe was so overcome with laughter while she excavated that her knife went too far, cut the poor foot, and left a lasting memorial of one artistic attempt at least. After this Amy subsided, till a mania for sketching from nature set her to haunting river, field, and wood for picturesque studies, and sighings for ruins to copy. I thought it was sightings, but it's sighings for ruins to copy. She caught endless colds sitting on damp grass to book a delicious bit composed of a stone, a stump, one mushroom, and a broken mullein stalk, or a heavenly mass of clouds that looked like a choice display of feather beds when done. She sacrificed her complexion, floating on the river in the midsummer sun, to study light and shade, and got a wrinkle over her nose, trying out after points of sight, or whatever the squint and string performance is called. If genius is eternal patience, as Michelangelo affirms, Amy certainly had some claim to the divine attribute, for she persevered in spite of all obstacles, failures, and discouragements, firmly believing that in time she should do something worthy to be called high art. She was learning, doing, and enjoying other things meanwhile, for she had resolved to be an attractive and accomplished woman, even if she never became a great artist. Here she succeeded better, for she was one of those happily created beings who please without effort, make friends everywhere, and take life so gracefully and easily that less fortunate souls are tempted to believe that such are born under a lucky star. Everybody liked her, for among her good gifts was tact. She had an instinctive sense of what was pleasing and proper, always said the right thing to the right person, did just what suited the time and place, and was so self-possessed that her sisters used to say, if Amy went to court without any rehearsal beforehand, she'd know exactly what to do. One of her weaknesses was a desire to move in our best society without being quite sure what the best really was. Money, position, fashionable accomplishment, and elegant manners were most desirable things in her eyes, and she liked to associate with those who possessed them, often mistaking the false for the true and admiring what was not admirable. Never forgetting that by birth she was a gentlewoman, she cultivated her aristocratic tastes and feelings, so that when the opportunity came, she might be ready to take the place from which poverty now excluded her. My lady, as her friends called her, sincerely desired to be a genuine lady, and was so at heart, but had yet to learn that money cannot buy refinement of nature, that rank does not always confer nobility, and that true breeding makes itself felt in spite of external drawbacks. I want to ask a favor of you, Mamma, Amy said, coming in with an important air one day. Well, little girl, what is it? Replied her mother, in whose eyes the stately young lady still remained the baby. Our drawing class breaks up next week, and before the girls separate for the summer, I want to ask them out here for a day. They are wild to see the river, sketch the broken bridge, and copy some of the things they admire in my book. They have been very kind to me in many ways, and I am grateful, for they are all rich and know I am poor, yet they never made any difference. Why should they? And Mrs. March put the question with what the girls called her Maria Theresa air. You know as well as I that it does make a difference with nearly everyone, so don't ruffle up like a dear motherly hen when your chickens get pecked by smarter birds. The ugly duckling turned out a swan, you know, and Amy smiled without bitterness, for she possessed a happy temper and a hopeful spirit. Mrs. March laughed and smoothed down her maternal pride as she asked, Well, my swan, what is your plan? I should like to ask the girls out to lunch next week, to take them a drive to the places they want to see, a row on the river perhaps, and make a little artistic fete for them. That looks feasible. What do you want for lunch? Cake, sandwiches, fruit, and coffee will be all that is necessary, I suppose. Oh dear no, we must have cold tongue and chicken, French chocolate, and ice cream besides. The girls are used to such things, and I want my lunch to be proper and elegant, though I do work for my living. How many young ladies are there? Asked her mother, beginning to look sober. 12 or 14 in the class, but I dare say they won't all come. Bless me, child, you will have to charter an omnibus to carry them about. Why, mother, how can you think of such a thing? Not more than 6 or 8 will probably come, so I shall hire a beach wagon and borrow Mr. Lawrence's cherry bounce. Hannah's pronunciation of charabanc. When it said cherry bounce, I thought it meant like a bouncy house, but I don't know if they had those in the 19th century. All right, keep going, sorry. All this will be very expensive, Amy. Not very. I've calculated the cost, and I'll pay for it myself. Don't you think, dear, that as these girls are used to such things, and the best we can do will be nothing new, that some simpler plan would be pleasanter to them, as a change, if nothing more, and much better for us than buying or borrowing what we don't need, and attempting a style not in keeping with our circumstances? If I can't have it as I like it, I don't care to have it at all. I know that I can carry it out perfectly well if you and the girls will help a little, and I don't see why I can't, if I'm willing to pay for it, said Amy, with the decision which opposition was apt to change into obstinacy. Mrs. March knew that experience was an excellent teacher, and when it was possible she left the children to learn alone the lessons which she would gladly have made easier if they had not objected to taking advice as much as they did Salts and Senna. Very well, Amy, if your heart is set upon it, and you see your way through without too great an outlay of money, time, and temper, I'll say no more. Talk it over with the girls, and whichever way you decide, I'll do my best to help you. Thanks, Mother, you are always so kind. And away went Amy to lay her plan before her sisters. Meg agreed at once and promised her aid, gladly offering anything she possessed, from her little house itself to her very best salt spoons. But Joe frowned upon the whole project and would have nothing to do with it at first. Why in the world should you spend your money, worry your family, and turn the house upside down for the parcel of girls who don't care a sixpence for you? I thought you had too much pride and sense to truckle to any mortal woman just because she wears French boots and rides in a coupe, said Joe, who, being called from the tragical climax of her novel, was not in the best mood for social enterprises. I don't truckle, and I hate being patronized as much as you do, returned Amy indignantly, for the two still jangled when such questions arose. The girls do care for me, and I for them, and there's a great deal of kindness and sense and talent among them, in spite of what you call fashionable nonsense. You don't care to make people like you, to go into good society and cultivate your manners and tastes. I do, and I mean to make the most of it every chance that comes. You can go through the world with your elbows out and your nose in the air and call it independence if you like. That's not my way. When Amy wetted her tongue and freed her mind, she usually got the best of it, for she seldom failed to have common sense on her side, while Joe carried her love of liberty and hate of conventionalities to such an unlimited extent that she naturally found herself worsted in an argument. Amy's definition of Joe's idea of independence was such a good hit that both burst out laughing, and the discussion took a more amiable turn. Much against her will, Joe at length consented to sacrifice a day to Mrs. Grundy and help her sister through what she regarded as a nonsensical business. The invitations were sent, most all accepted, and the following Monday was set apart for the grand event. Hannah was out of humor because her week's work was deranged, and prophesied that if the washin' and ironin' warn't done regular, nothing would go well anywheres. This hitch in the mainspring of the domestic machinery had a bad effect upon the whole concern, but Amy's motto was nil desperandum, and having made up her mind what to do, she proceeded to do it in spite of all obstacles. To begin with, Hannah's cooking didn't turn out well. The chicken was tough, the tongue too salt, and the chocolate wouldn't froth properly. Then the cake and ice cost more than Amy expected, so did the wagon, and various other expenses which seemed trifling at the outset counted up rather alarmingly afterward. Beth got cold and took to her bed. Meg had an unusual number of callers to keep her at home, and Joe was in such a divided state of mind that her breakages and accidents and mistakes were uncommonly numerous, serious, and trying. If it hadn't been for Mother, I should never have got through, as Amy declared afterward, and gratefully remembered when the best joke of the season was entirely forgotten by everybody else. If it was not fair on Monday, the young ladies were to come on Tuesday, an arrangement which aggravated Joe and Hannah to the last degree. On Monday morning the weather was in that undecided state which is more exasperating than a steady pour. It drizzled a little, shone a little, blew a little, and didn't make up its mind till it was too late for anyone else to make up theirs. Amy was up at dawn, hustling people out of their beds and through their breakfasts, that the house might be got in order. The parlor struck her as looking uncommonly shabby, but without stopping to sigh for what she had not. She skilfully made the best of what she had, arranging chairs over the worn places in the carpet, covering stains on the walls and pictures framed in ivy, and filling up empty corners with homemade statuary, which gave an artistic air to the room, as did the lovely vases of flowers Joe scattered at. The lunch looked charmingly, and as she surveyed it, she sincerely hoped it would taste good, and that the borrowed glass, china, and silver would get safely home again. The carriages were promised. Meg and Mother were all ready to do their honors. Beth was able to help Hannah behind the scenes. Joe had engaged to be as lively and amiable as an absent mind, an aching head, and a very decided disapproval of everybody and everything would allow, and as she warily dressed, Amy cheered herself with anticipations of the happy moment when, lunch safely over, she should drive away with her friends for an afternoon of artistic delights, for the cherry bounce and the broken bridge were her strong points. Then came 2 hours of suspense, during which she vibrated from parlor to porch, while public opinion varied like the weathercock. A smart shower at 11 and had evidently quenched the enthusiasm of the young ladies, who were to arrive at 12, for nobody came, and at 2 the exhausted family sat down in a blaze of sunshine to consume the perishable portions of the feast, that nothing might be lost. No doubt about the weather today. They will certainly come, so we must fly round and be ready for them, said Amy, as the sun woke her the next morning. She spoke briskly, but in her secret soul she wished she had said nothing about Tuesday, for her interest, like her cake, was getting a little stale. I can't get any lobsters, so you will have to do without salad today, said Mr. March, coming in half an hour later with an expression of placid despair. Use the chicken, then. The toughness won't matter in a salad, advised his wife. Hannah left it on the kitchen table a minute, and the kittens got at it. I'm very sorry, Amy, added Beth, who was still a patroness of cats. Then I must have a lobster, for tongue alone won't do, said Amy decidedly. Shall I rush into town and demand one? Asked Joe, with the magnanimity of a martyr. You'd come bringing it home under your arm without any paper, just to try me. I'll go myself, answered Amy, whose temper was beginning to fail. Shrouded in thick veil and armed with a genteel travelling basket, she departed, feeling that a cool drive would soothe her ruffled spirit and fit her for the labours of the day. After some delay, the object of her desire was procured, likewise a bottle of dressing, to prevent further loss of time at home, and off she drove again, well pleased with her own forethought. As the omnibus contained only one other passenger, a sleepy old lady, Amy pocketed her veil and beguiled the tedium of the way by trying to find out where all her money had gone to. So busy was she with her card full of refractory figures that she did not observe a newcomer who entered without stopping the vehicle, till a masculine voice said, "Good morning, Miss March," and looking up she beheld one of Laurie's most elegant college friends. Fervently hoping that he would get out before she did, Amy utterly ignored the basket at her feet, and congratulating herself that she had on her new travelling dress, returned the young man's greeting with her usual suavity and spirit. They got on excellently, for Amy's chief care was soon set at rest by learning that the gentleman would leave first, and she was chatting away in a peculiarly lofty strain when the old lady got out. In stumbling to the door, she upset the basket, and, oh horror, the lobster, in all its vulgar size and brilliancy, was revealed to the high-born eyes of a Tudor. By Jove, she's forgot her dinner, cried the unconscious youth, poking the scarlet monster into its place with his cane, and preparing to hand out the basket after the old lady. Please don't. It's mine, murmured Amy, with a face nearly as red as her fish. Oh, really, I beg pardon. It's an uncommonly fine one, isn't it? Said Tudor, with great presence of mind and an air of sober interest that did credit to his breeding. Amy recovered herself in a breath, set her basket boldly on the seat, and said, laughing, "Don't you wish you were to have some of the salad he's to make, and to see the charming young ladies who are to eat it?" Now that was tact, for two of the ruling foibles of the masculine mind were touched. The lobster was instantly surrounded by a halo of pleasing reminiscences, and curiosity about the charming young ladies diverted his mind from the comical mishap. I suppose he'll laugh and joke over it with Laurie, but I shan't see them. That's a comfort, thought Amy, as Tudor bowed and departed. She did not mention this meeting at home, though she discovered that, thanks to the upset, her new dress was much damaged by the rivulets of dressing that meandered down the skirt, but went through with the preparations, which now seemed more irksome than before, and at 12 o'clock all was ready again. Feeling that the neighbors were interested in her movements, she wished to efface the memory of yesterday's failure by a grand success today, so she ordered the cherry bounce and drove away in state to meet and escort her guests to the banquet. There's the rumble, they're coming. I'll go into the porch to meet them. It looks hospitable, and I want the poor child to have a good time after all her trouble, said Mrs. March, suiting the action to the word, but after one glance she retired with an indescribable expression. For looking quite lost in the big carriage sat Amy and one young lady. Run, Beth, and help Hannah clear half the things off the table. It will be too absurd to put a luncheon for 12 before a single girl, cried Jo, hurrying away to the lower regions, too excited to stop even for a laugh. In came Amy, quite calm and delightfully cordial to the one guest who had kept her promise. The rest of the family, being of a dramatic turn, played their parts equally well, and Miss Elliot found them a most hilarious set, for it was impossible to entirely control the merriment which possessed them. The remodelled lunch being gaily partaken of, the studio and the garden visited, the art discussed with enthusiasm, Amy ordered a buggy, alas for the elegant cherry bounce, and drove her friend quietly about the neighborhood till sunset, when the party went out. As she came walking in, looking very tired, but as composed as ever, she observed that every vestige of the unfortunate fête had disappeared, except a suspicious pucker about the corners of Jo's mouth. "You've had a lovely afternoon for your drive, dear," said her mother, as respectfully as if the whole 12 had come. "Miss Elliot is a very sweet girl, and seemed to enjoy herself, I thought," observed Beth with unusual warmth. "Could you spare me some of your cake? I really need some. I have so much company, and I can't make such delicious stuff as yours," asked Meg, soberly. "Take it all. I'm the only one here who likes sweet things, and it will mold before I can dispose of it," answered Amy, thinking with a sigh of the generous store she had laid in for such an end as this. "It's a pity Laurie isn't here to help us," began Jo, as they sat down to ice cream and salad for the 4th time in 2 days. A warning look from her mother checked any further remarks, and the whole family ate in heroic silence, till Mr. March mildly observed, "Salad was one of the favorite dishes of the ancients," and Evelyn, here a general explosion of laughter cut short the history of salads, to the great surprise of the learned gentleman. "Bundle everything into a basket and send it to the Hummels. Germans like messes. I'm sick of the sight of this, and there's no reason you should all die of a surfeit because I've been a fool," cried Amy, wiping her eyes. "I thought I should have died when I saw you two girls rattling about in the what-you-call-it like 2 little kernels in a very big nutshell, and mother waiting in state to receive the throng," sighed Jo, quite spent with laughter. I'm very sorry you were disappointed, dear, but we all did our best to satisfy you, said Mrs. March in a tone full of motherly regret. I am satisfied. I've done what I undertook, and it's not my fault that it failed. I comfort myself with that, said Amy, with a little quiver in her voice. I thank you all very much for helping me, and I'll thank you still more if you won't allude to it for a month at least. No one did for several months, but the word fete always produced a general smile, and Laurie's birthday gift to Amy was a tiny coral lobster in the shape of a charm for her watchguard. And that's the end of chapter 3. So let's go back and look at the pictures. Okay, so we've got a tiny little lobster there on the corner. There were a lot of pictures at the beginning of this chapter. So here is imagining the tableau of Amy March's artwork. So this is an artist rendering of what Amy March might have drawn. And here is Daniel Chester French. And he... I'll read it. Received art supplies and lessons from May Alcott, who encouraged him to pursue a career as a sculptor.
He's not arguing.
Here is, unlike Amy's attempt, May's effort to make a cast of her foot succeeded. That's a cast of May Alcott's foot. And this is, in her 30s, May Alcott became known as a talented copyist, especially of the works of J.M.W. Turner. So, a copyist is not someone who makes their own art, they copy someone else's art. So, and back before there were, like, printers, yeah. It was an important thing so that people could have pictures on their walls. And here's
a tedious thing, I bet.
Yeah, probably. And this is young May Alcott used almost every available surface for her artwork, including this breadboard, emblazoned with a poker sketch of Raphael that Alcott mentions in the text. It can still be seen. So the cool thing about this is that these stories are all based on Louisa May Alcott's childhood and her growing up. So I hope that you enjoyed the story. 2 chapters today, and tomorrow we'll start, or next time rather, we'll start with chapter 4, literary lessons, and the first word is fortune. And so we'll see you then, and God bless you. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.